wake up, well, I know I'm gonna be the man who wakes up next to you. When I go out, yeah, I know I'm gonna be the man who goes along with you. If I get drunk.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Sooner Nation podcast. I mean, it's a big week for Oklahoma. It's game week, but today we're going to start by talking a little bit of recruiting in regards to the position group that's probably the most likely group to define Oklahoma's future in the SEC. I'm talking about the defensive line. Now, let's be honest. When a program makes the leap into the SEC, the conversation always comes back to one spot. Not the quarterbacks, not the receivers, not even the running backs. While those are obviously important position groups, it's really the defensive line. The question is, can you hold up at the point of attack against the likes of Alabama, Georgia, LSU? Can you create havoc against those run-heavy fronts and still pressure quarterbacks who just, they seem to be ready for the NFL halfway through their collegiate careers? Now, for years back in the Big 12, under Lincoln Riley, the answer to this question was not quite. But things have changed, and they're continuing to change under Brent Venables and defensive tackles coach Todd Bates. The trenches for Oklahoma are no longer an afterthought. They've become the foundation of everything that the Sooners are building. And with the latest commitment of Virginia defensive tackle T-Ron Richardson, Oklahoma just added another brick to that foundation, if you will. Richardson is a 6'5", 295-pound interior lineman out of Hopewell, Virginia. Now, he's not the five-star headliner, but don't let rankings fool you. This is exactly the type of player who thrives in Brent Venables' scheme. He's quick off the ball. He's long enough to control space. He's powerful enough to keep blockers from locking in on him. And he's disruptive when he gets free. Now, he only had 52 tackles and a single sack last season. But if you look at his tape, what you're going to see is that first step. What you're going to see is closing speed. You're going to see his motor. Now, he's raw. There's no question about that. But what you can't teach is his combination of size and athleticism. And what stands out the most is that Oklahoma beat out the likes of Penn State, Virginia Tech, Maryland, Syracuse, and a whole lot of other schools, but those were all regional for a kid from Virginia. And his offer list wasn't shallow. Georgia, Auburn, Florida, they all wanted him as well. So even though recruiting sites have him outside the national top 400, the college coaches who actually know what plays on Saturdays in the SEC, they saw him as a priority. Now, here's another piece of the story. Oklahoma won its recruitment because of consistency. Richardson said himself, the Sooners offered early. They kept checking in. They FaceTimed him. They texted him. They made him feel wanted. Now, in today's recruiting landscape where NIL can make things feel transactional, that personal touch, it matters. He didn't just commit to a logo. He committed to a program that made him feel needed. And that's the culture. That's what Brent Venables is establishing. But speaking of NIL, Richardson openly mentioned that it was Oklahoma's revenue sharing packaged with the Soul Mission program that played a huge role in his commitment. It wasn't just about football. It was about development after football. It was about community. It was about culture. And that's what Oklahoma has to sell in this new world. And clearly it's working. Now, for just a second, let's talk about Venables' system. And that is built to free up athletic interior defenders. Think back to his days at Clemson. It was all about those one-gap disruptors, right? He doesn't want defensive tackles who just eat space. He wants guys who can attack and force offensive lines to make adjustments. And that's why Richardson was drawn to Oklahoma. He said it himself. He wanted to play in a defense where he could attack the line of scrimmage. Now, he's not going to – this isn't David Stone. He's not going to walk onto campus in Norman and be a day one starter. And yeah, I know, I get it. David Stone wasn't either, but you get what I'm talking about with the hype. But that's okay. Richardson becomes Oklahoma's 7th defensive line commitment in this 2026 class. He's the 3rd guy on the interior alongside Brian Harris and James Carrington. That's the blueprint. That's what SEC programs do. They don't build defensive lines with just 1 or 2 stars. They build them with depth. They rotate them in waves. And by the time Oklahoma hits the heart of the SEC schedule in 2027, Richardson could be one of those second wave guys who gives you 30 snaps, and he makes every single one of them count. And here's why this matters for Oklahoma fans. This isn't about landing the shiny 5-star recruit. This is about stacking bodies who fit the vision Brent Venables and Todd Bates have for this defense. They're not chasing stars. They're chasing traits. They're chasing fit. They're chasing guys with upside. And championships, they're not always won with top-level recruiting talent, the top-rated guys. They're won with a guy who comes in, buys into the system, and then 3 years later, he's wrecking games on 3rd and 6 while those headliner guys rotate out for a breather. So what do we make of T-Ron Richardson? To me, this commitment is another sign that Oklahoma's defensive line recruiting looks like an SEC programs, and really for the first time in a long time. There's volume, there's variety, there's athletic upside, there's fits to the schematics, and a culture that recruits believe in. That's the magic formula. Richardson may not make headlines today, but in a couple of years, don't be surprised if he's the guy you see collapsing pockets, creating tackles for loss, and letting those 5-star edge rushers shine. The bottom line is Oklahoma didn't just land another defensive lineman. They landed a defensive lineman who fits their identity, who bought into their culture, and who strengthens the one area of the roster that absolutely must hit if the Sooners want to continue to build towards an SEC contender. Venables knows it. Todd Bates knows it. And Richardson, well, he's on board. All right, welcome back to the podcast. We're talking everything football today. It's game week. Specifically today, we're going to talk about Oklahoma's running back room. And, after a brutal 2024 season where the run game was more of a liability than it was a weapon, there's a very different vibe heading into 2025. Now, we all know last year Oklahoma stumbled to a 6-7 record, and a lot went wrong. I think if you had to point to one area that really crippled the team, it was the inability to consistently run the football. Now, think about this. This is a program that once churned out the likes of Adrian Peterson, DeMarco Murray, Samaje Perine, Kennedy Brooks. It's a program that was built on physicality and balance. They finished 76th in the country and 11th in the SEC in rushing yards. Now, that's not just a slip in production. That's more of an identity crisis. Now, you could make the argument, and it would be a very legitimate argument about the offensive line. We talked about that yesterday. But here we are. We've got a new season on the horizon, and suddenly there's optimism. Suddenly this backfield looks like one of the deepest and most talented position groups on the entire roster. And despite what the depth chart may have said when it was released on Monday, I think the reason for this optimism in this backfield starts with one name, Jaydn Ott. Now, you know this by now. Ott's the transfer from Cal. He probably is the most important offseason addition to Oklahoma. I mean, obviously there's a good argument to be made at the quarterback spot with John Mateer, but Ott's a guy who has already proven himself at a Power 4 level. I mean, he's a 2-time All Pac-12 player, over 1,300 rushing yards as a sophomore. He's got 25 career touchdowns under his belt, and there's legitimate NFL buzz about him. Now, his junior year got derailed by an ankle injury, but the reports out of Norman are that that ankle's healthy. And once his shoulder heals up from the injury he suffered in camp, I mean, he's ready to roll. And that's not just, his ability to carry the ball. We're talking about Ott is a legitimate all-purpose back. He can catch, he can block, he can lead. And that's exactly what Venables and DeMarco Murray need after a chaotic, injury-riddled 2024 season where no one really established themselves as the guy. And honestly, I mean, if we're just going to have a kumbaya moment, no one has legitimately established themselves as the guy in Oklahoma's backfield since Kennedy Brooks. But it looks like with Ott, the Sooners finally have a clear RB1. Now, we're going to talk depth chart here in just a little bit. But here's the thing. Behind Ott, this room is absolutely stacked. You start with Jovantae Barnes, who's now a senior, and he was Oklahoma's leading rusher last year with 577 yards, but then his season ended early with an ankle injury. Now, when he's healthy, he's explosive. I mean, just go back to that game against Maine, 203 yards and 3 touchdowns. That was vintage Jovantae Barnes. This is a guy that if he can stay on the field, he's going to be a massive complementary piece to Ott. You got Xavier Robinson, a local kid from Oklahoma City. Now, he runs angry. And he's big. I mean, 6 foot, 226 pounds. He's a downhill bruiser type guy, and he's tailor-made for short yardage. Now, this is your dude you want in red zone situations. Now, obviously, his breakout moment came on the biggest stage possible, 107 yards and 2 touchdowns against Alabama. That's how you announce yourself to the world. And don't sleep on Taylor Tatum either. He came in as the number 1 running back recruit in the 2024 class. Now, this guy is also a baseball player, which shows his athleticism. And last year, he showed flashes, 278 yards on 56 carries, but there were legitimate issues with ball security and pass protection. Now, you can say those are freshman mistakes, and maybe with another offseason of development, this is a kid that could easily become the lightning fast change of pace option that this running back group needs. Now, if you're looking for the wild card or the X factor in this group, I think it's going to be, undoubtedly, it's going to be true freshman Tory Blaylock. Flat out electric style player. 4-star recruit from Texas. He's got the track speed. He had a monster senior year of high school with over 1,200 yards, 26 touchdowns. Now, I don't know. Starting the season with Ott nicked up, he may get more than what he initially was slated in terms of a run on the field. But I kind of feel like maybe he's that guy, kind of like Michael Fasasi we talked about with the offensive line. He's going to work himself into significant playing time, I believe. And when you stack all this together, you've got Ott, Barnes, Robinson, Tatum, Blaylock. You start to see why this running back room has people kind of buzzing around Norman. For the first time in a long time, there's depth and clarity. Last year, 5 different guys carried at least 20 times. Now, that wasn't strategy. That was survival. It was musical chairs because of injuries and inconsistency. But this year, at least you hope. But it feels different. There seems to be a pecking order. There seems to be balance. There seems to be definition. And then you factor in the scheme change with new offensive coordinator Ben Arbuckle. He's bringing, he's from that tree of the air raid offense. But he's got a more modern version, a more modern approach. He loves versatile running backs who can catch the ball out of the backfield. And that fits this group of guys perfectly. Ott's got 71 career receptions. Barnes has 37. Even Robinson and Tatum have flashed as pass catchers early in their careers. So this isn't just about pounding the ball between the tackles. It's about giving John Mateer the new starting quarterback, John Mateer, reliable safety valves. It's about giving matchup problems in the passing game. And of course, it wouldn't be Oklahoma football without a few other names floating around, right? Because you got to look at walk-on Andy Bass. I mean, he's still hanging around after battling injuries, and he's finally healthy. There's a potential he could be a gadget guy or a spark plug. Gabe Sawchuk is another name that's out there. Yep, he's the younger brother of Gavin, who transferred out to Florida State. But he's also on this roster, and he could earn touches. But when you zoom out, the story here is pretty simple. Oklahoma's backfield finally feels stable. It feels talented. It feels SEC ready. I know that's a phrase we've thrown around a lot. And it's something that we couldn't say last year. We thought they were there going into the season, but they weren't. They ended up just cycling through bodies trying to find answers. Which makes the big question this year, of course, health. Ott's already nicked up. But if Barnes stays healthy, if Robinson and Tatum keep developing, I do believe this group could be special. But we did say something similar last August before all those injuries piled up. So it's fair for us fans to still have a little skepticism. But even with that, you can't deny it. This is the deepest backfield that Oklahoma has had since Lincoln Riley was calling plays. And that's saying something. With Ott leading the way and the legitimate weapons behind him, Oklahoma finally has a chance to get back to what made it dangerous for so many years. That's balance. A run game that forces defenses to respect it. A run game that opens up play action passing downfield. A run game that can finish things off, finish off opponents in the fourth quarter. If that happens, if this backfield really lives up to its hype, then it won't just be a bounce back season. It could be the foundation for Oklahoma contending in the SEC. Hey, thanks so much for listening. We got more to come, but do me a favor, wherever you're listening to us from, whatever platform you're using, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or something else, Megaphone, would you hit that subscribe for us? Let's stay locked in together because you know what? The season's here, and we've got a lot more coming on the Sooner Nation podcast. Well, it's game week in Norman after 7 long months of off-season build-up. The roster shuffling, the spring practices, summer conditioning, Oklahoma football is finally back. If you listen to Brent Venables in his Tuesday press conference, I feel like you could hear it in his voice. There was some excitement there. There was some edge there. And there was even some urgency. He opened up that media session by saying this: everything that we've been doing the last 7 months builds to this moment. There's great buzz and excitement on the practice field, in the media room, and certainly here in Norman. That buzz it's real. I believe that the buzz is real. I don't think it's just hype. I think it's expectation. Venables is heading into year 4, and this is the most battle-tested roster he's had yet. Now, the theme that ran through his remarks to me on Tuesday was clear. It was confidence built through competition, development, and a culture that believes that he believes is finally taking hold. Now, let's start this with the biggest stories of the offseason. The cornerback room. Injuries and inexperience, and they made it a question mark. And then you got Eli Bowen, sideline, sophomore Jacoby Johnson has stepped up. Venables called him as good of an athlete as we have on the roster. Now remember, Johnson came in as a converted high school receiver. Now he played mostly special teams last year, but he's in position to earn some real snaps, especially with Bowen dinged up. So what's changed with Johnson? I think it's confidence, fundamentals, maturity. And Venables credited Jay Valai, the quarterback's coach, for the guidance, but he made it clear. He did. Johnson has done the work himself. That's the development piece that Venables preaches on so much. And while we're on defensive backs, Venables lit up a little bit when talking about true freshman Cortland Gilroy. I mean, he got 2 times of conversation in that press conference on Tuesday. With Bowen out, it's Gilroy that's really been thrown into the fire as well. And Venables, I mean, he couldn't say enough about him. He called him ultra aggressive. He said he was confident but humble. One of the greatest compliments I think you could ever get as a player, Venables said that he was super coachable. He even went on to share a story about Gilroy, what Venables says, bringing some juice to practice and firing up the entire team. And that's not normal for an 18-year-old, but that's the mentality that Venables wants to build around. Now, of course, the headline figure this season isn't at corner, it's at quarterback. John Mateer, coming in from Washington State, has officially been named the starter, as everybody thought he would. And Venables' confidence in him came through loud and clear. He said this of Mateer: I studied a lot of tape, 2 years worth. He's a guy you can count on who's not going to flinch. He cares about his teammates, his coaches, his opportunity. And when he's faced with adversity, he's always responded. That's exactly what Oklahoma needs in year 2 of the SEC. They need a steady hand. They need a leader who can guide Arbuckle's new offense. And Venables, he's not just putting a quarterback out there. He's putting his faith in someone who matches this program's toughness and resiliency. Now, as you know, I mean, everybody knows, Mateer can't do this all by himself. The offensive line has to be better than it was last year. And Venables singled out one guy, right guard Fibichi Nuwu. He started all 13 games last season. But the difference now is that he's got confidence and he's more physical. About him, Venables said he's changed his body, he stepped into a leadership role, and he shows up every day ready to make the team better. That's a big deal. That's a big deal for an offensive line that still has depth chart battles going on. And Venables doesn't see those ors listed on the depth chart. He doesn't see those as weaknesses. He sees them as a sign of real competition, which is exactly the environment he's wanted to create since he took over this program. Then when we're talking about development, that was maybe the biggest theme of the entire press conference. Venables talked about building through patience and investment, not just relying on the transfer portal. He went on to point out guys like Gentry Williams, Robert Spears Jennings, both of whom fought through shoulder surgeries and are now leaders on this defense. He talked about Grayson Holton, who came in as a tight end recruit and is now a 300-pound defensive lineman. He also mentioned Kip Lewis and Kobe McKenzie, who went from raw and overwhelmed freshmen to trusted starters on this defense. Venables called this foundational. That's his word. These aren't quick fix guys. These are Sooners who stayed, developed, and now embody the culture that he's been building. And when you talk about culture, the defensive line's probably the most clearest picture of how far Oklahoma has come. We talked about this a little bit in the opening segment with recruiting. When Brent arrived, he said that maybe they had 1 or 2 players over 300 pounds. And as everyone in the world knows, that's not going to cut it in the SEC. But look at them now. They've got size, they've got rotational depth, they've got legitimate trench players. And that transformation didn't happen overnight. It happened through recruiting, it happened through development, it happened through reshaping expectations in the weight room, and what happens in those meeting rooms. Brent even got a little bit reflective about his own journey. He admitted that the lack of wins has been disappointing. He knows that fans want results and they want the results right now. But he also, I know some people took this as him throwing shade at Lincoln Riley. And maybe it was. I think it gives you a glimpse into the program under Riley. But I think Brent was just trying to let you know what it was like when he got here. I mean, when he walked in, he said that, there was a roster that was in flux. There were poor academics. He talked about the team GPA of just 2.2. He talked about failed drug tests. And now, 4 years later, he sees a very different picture. his words, our best days are in front of us. And you just you got the feeling that he meant it. Of course, there is a football game on Saturday, and we all know that season opener against Illinois State won't really be a measuring stick for where Oklahoma is. That's a game where the Sooners should have handled their business. But we've talked about it, you've talked about it, everybody and their mom has talked about it. The real test for this team comes in week 2 when Michigan rolls into Norman. That's going to be when we see whether this competition, this culture shift, this new quarterback, the rebuilt offensive line, can they actually hold up on the biggest of stages? So in terms of Venables in his press conference on Tuesday, I'm going to leave you with this. He closed the press conference by saying this: we have an amazing staff, an amazing locker room, and I'm at one of the best programs in college football. My responsibility is to put a product on the field that everybody who loves Oklahoma is proud of. And I believe we're building toward that. Now that's, according to the coach, that's where Oklahoma stands right now. They're hopeful, they're confident, and finally, maybe they're stable. So game week is here, the wait is over. And, for Brent Venables, year 4, it starts right now. All right, well, let's close it out by going back to the running back position. Look, there's anticipation for Saturday night's season opener against Illinois State. I get it. It's high. Oklahoma official week 1 depth chart gave all of us something extra to talk about. And let's just say it like this, right? Let's just call it what it was. It was a surprise. A running back, that's the position that many of us expected Jaydn Ott to lock down immediately. Now, he wasn't listed first, and he wasn't listed second. He was listed third behind Jovantae Barnes and Tory Blaylock. Now, if you've been following Oklahoma this offseason, if you listen to the first segment of this podcast, you know that Ott was one of the splashiest portal additions. We talked about it, over 3,000 yards in his career, over 30 touchdowns, 3 seasons at Cal. I know it was a shortened season last year because of injury, but this is the guy who's averaging 1,000 yards per season, 10 touchdowns per season. He's a proven workhorse. And he even got all SEC recognition before he's even stepped on the field in Crimson and Cream. So naturally, the assumption was he'd walk in, take over as RB1, and give Oklahoma that instant star power in the backfield. But, as often is the case in football, things aren't always that simple. Now, there's no reason to panic over this. There's really no reason to make a big deal out of this. Ott's been slowed by a shoulder injury, and it limited him in camp. And what that did was, we talked about the depth of this running back room. It opened the doors for other guys to step up. And when position coach DeMarco Murray and the offensive staff looked around, honestly, they looked at who was still standing. Who was able to carry the load when Ott couldn't? And it was 2 guys. It was Jovantae Barnes and it was Tory Blaylock. And, the weekly show, what's called The Huddle, that they do over at Rudy's. Listen to what Jim Nagy said. Because this is such a big deal. And it's really such a non-big deal, big deal. You know what I mean? Like, it's a non-starter, but it's a big deal. Because you got a true freshman behind an all-conference type player. Excuse me. Say that differently. You've got an all-conference type player behind a true freshman. So obviously Nagy was asked to speak about it. And here's what he said. In terms of where the depth chart came out, we had Jovantae Barnes and Tory Blaylock 1 and 2. And they deserved that. Not only did Jaydn, so here we go, talking about Ott. Not only did Jaydn miss a lot of time during fall camp, so did the rest of the room. We went 2+ weeks with only Barnes and Blaylock as the 2 backs carrying the ball. I can't say enough about the workload those guys put in. So there's your answer right there. It's not because Ott comes in and he's a bust. It's not because Ott comes in and he can't pick up the schemes. It's not because Ott came in and wasn't what they thought they were getting. It was just availability. And if this is your guy, this is the guy who's going to power your offense from the backfield. I mean, do you want him to continue to get banged up in practice? Do you want him to get banged up against Illinois State? Or would you rather him be at 100% or as close to 100% as possible week 2 against Michigan? But the word that keeps coming out with Barnes is workload. And we know that. He was a grinder last year. One of the few bright spots in the Oklahoma offense that was just abysmal. And we mentioned earlier that 200-yard performance against Maine before the ankle injury. When Oklahoma needed tough yards, Barnes was that guy. He was that guy that could go between the tackles. He could get yards after contact. He was the guy that could help in pass protection. Now, he's not the flashiest runner, but he's dependable, he's physical, he's versatile. Now, Blaylock, the freshman, I mean, here's a guy that brings a completely different flavor, right? He's been one of the breakout stories of the offseason. You may remember he was a 4-star recruit in the 2025 class. But the buzz around him started really back in the spring. And it only got louder as fall camp moved on. People talked about his speed, his agility, and the balance, man. Just they all jump off on this guy. He's got that big play every time he touches the ball type threat to him, that feel about him. But he's also got size. I mean, he's shown that he can handle the grind just by his frame. He's not just a guy that can go outside. He can come in between the tackles. And that's rare to get that kind of hype, that kind of buzz out of a first-year player. So the question we got to figure out now is, where does that leave Jaydn Ott? The staff knows. There's enough tape. There's enough film. They know what they have in this guy. They've got a 1,300-yard back. They've got a back with game-breaking ability. And they know what's ahead. They know that Illinois State is just the opener. Michigan's coming to town in week 2. And that's the game that Oklahoma has circled. That's the one that's going to be really the true measuring stick as we start the 2025 season. So why rush it? Why rush Ott back? Why risk aggravating the shoulder injury? There's absolutely no reason for that. So the reality of this depth chart is fluid. It's week 1, not week 8. And when you take the long view here, you zoom out, the Sooners have one of the deepest backfields in the SEC, maybe one of the deepest in the entire nation. Look, don't just take my word for it, because I am, at the end of the day, I am a fan. But Pro Football Focus analyst Max Chadwick, he ranked the Oklahoma running back room as one of the top 10 in college football heading into the 2025 season. And it's really not hard to see why. When you go player by player, we've talked about Ott, the transfer star, the home run hitter, the guy that was brought in to elevate this offense. We've highlighted Barnes, the veteran presence, that guy who gives you, 3-down dependability. We've talked about Blaylock, the freshman phenom who's already too talented to keep off the field, it seems. But, man, it doesn't stop there. Xavier Robinson is back. Last year, he was the freshman X factor. He's that physical runner who showed flashes of being more than just depth. He's the kind of back who could carve out a role as the season grinds on, especially in the SEC when bodies start wearing down. Taylor Tatum is another name that we've talked about. Like Robinson, he showed his moments as a freshman despite the struggles of the offensive line in 2024. He's got to develop. I mean, clearly he's got to develop. But he gives Oklahoma another option, another style, if you will, to mix into the rotation. That's 5 running backs. Ott, Barnes, Blaylock, Robinson, Tatum. And all of them, every single one of them, brings something different, speed, power, vision, versatility. That's a luxury that most programs don't have. And for a new offensive coordinator like Ben Arbuckle is in Norman, man, that's a tool chest of possibilities. And honestly, that's when you look at his creativity, that's where I think things get really exciting with this running back room. Because Arbuckle's offense is very similar to what Oklahoma had in Lincoln Riley, in that it's about stressing defenses. It's about making them defend every blade of grass, every angle, every skill set. It's about finding that mismatch and exploiting it. And when you've got running backs who can catch passes, protect the quarterback, and then hit for those explosive plays, there's so many possibilities that open up. Now, Barnes and Blaylock, we've talked about, they both catch the ball well out of the backfield. Ott, he's a nightmare in space. Robinson and Tatum give you that physicality that wear teams down. So yeah, we've got a week one depth chart that might have raised some eyebrows, but the bigger takeaway is this. Oklahoma doesn't just have a starter. They have a committee of playmakers. And in today's version of college football, particularly in this conference, that's how you survive. One back is not going to carry you through November anymore. Those days, I think, are gone. But a rotation can get you there. Now, is there still a pecking order? Absolutely. And I think Ott is the most talented back in the room. And if he wasn't injured, he would likely be RB1. I think he'll be RB1 by Michigan, if not shortly after. Barnes has earned his stripes, and I think he's going to be a stabilizing force. I do believe Blaylock's going to get touches, and he's going to get them early because I think he's just too dynamic. But the overall strength of this group is their depth. And like we talked about with the defensive line in this opening segment, depth is what Oklahoma has been building across the board. It's part of what Venables' vision is since arriving in Norman. Competition, development, depth. That's why you see a true freshman like Blaylock leapfrogging on that chart. That's why you see Barnes rewarded for sticking it out and grinding. And that's why we shouldn't panic when you see our star transfer listed not 1, not 2, but number 3. Looking ahead to Saturday, this staff knows, like what we've talked about already, the Illinois State game, that's where they can get live reps. That's where they can rotate guys. And that's where we need to keep the big picture in mind. Because that real test, again, it's Michigan. That's when we're going to see how this backfield rotation actually functions against one of the best defenses in college football. That's when we'll learn whether Barnes can be steady against elite front sevens. That's where Blaylock's speed translates at the highest level and whether Ott is ready to carry the load when it matters the most. Is he healthy again? But here's the bottom line. Oklahoma's running back room, man, it's deep, it's versatile, and it's as deep and as versatile as it's been in years. You've got experience in that room. You've got explosiveness in that room. And then you've got youth pushing veterans, and that's such a valuable asset. That's exactly what you need heading into the grind of conference play. And it's coming fast. So yeah, I mean, look, the depth chart might look surprising at first glance. But don't just focus on that. Zoom out. It's a good problem for Oklahoma to have. For once, Oklahoma's not scrambling to find running backs. It's not a lack of talent. It's not a lack of productivity. They're just figuring out how to use all the talent that they've got, all the talent that they've stockpiled. And that, Sooner Nation, that's a luxury that we should all be excited about. Yeah, so that's going to wrap it up for this episode. Man, if you've enjoyed our breakdown of the Sooners running back situation, if you've enjoyed what we've been producing this last week and a half or so, please give us a subscribe, drop a review, share it with a friend. We're we got Illinois State still coming up. I'm really pumped about next week with Michigan. I mean, how can you not be excited about that? Have a great middle of the week, and guess what? 3 days away, 4 days away. What is it? We got to get through Thursday, Friday, and then Saturday is here. 3 days.